in the ASP.NET, we have the last topic of caching. This is a very handy way of implementing the most reused functionalities so that it should not be burdening the server. So this is a typical concept. The caching provides the scalability, and it improves the performance, and it increases the user satisfaction. So all these things are actually we got this in this caching concept. Okay, so let us understand basically what is the meaning of the caching and how it actually performs in the ASP.NET. Caching is the most critical factor in creating scalable and high performance web applications. Means, suppose you are creating a website and that is hardly going to be used by some 1 lakh users. It does not affect the web server or the hardware resources that you are deploying somewhere, maybe on the remote server. Okay, so because the 1 lakh users for a normal website is not that much very burden on the server, if we can think. But suppose what if the case of like you have created an application which is maybe on the lines of the Twitter or Facebook. So on those terms, you have created an application where massive number of users are getting connected to your website, and your server should not be bothered about the scalability of your number of users. Okay, so on any given minute, maybe some 1 million users are already connected. ऐसा भी आपको वेबसाइट्स बड़े-बड़े वेबसाइट्स आपको दिखेंगे जैसे Amazon, Facebook, okay, so Twitter. So millions of requests per second. So it's naturally these days it is all when you consider the biggest applications, all these are part and parcel of the normal development life cycle. So your application should be robust, your application should be scalable, and it should be providing the best performance also with these number of highest users connected to your website. So that is what this particular scalability term is. So scalable means even though your website per second is connected with 10 million requests, it should be seamlessly serving the responses to those 10 million users without any problem. It should not be crashed. It should not be giving the lags. Okay, or otherwise your responses are not at all generated up to some 2 to 3 seconds. Okay, so all these are the issues for the scalability. So how to provide a best website in your minimal resources of your hardware. So how to create this scalable kind of web applications is, for that we got this technique that is called as caching. It's not catching, it's caching. Okay, so caching locations can be on the web server, or they can be on the proxy servers. That means they actually not the actual servers, they are somewhat sitting in between your web server and the client. They are the proxy servers, and they can be on the client browsers also. So like the case of the state management, you can save the information of the cache either in the web server, that means on the server side, or at the middleware, or at the client side. Okay, so these three things are available for doing the caching on your web application. So these are the general locations generally offered by the ASP.NET. And some typical types of caching are, first one is output caching, which is very easiest to implement. Second one is fragment caching, that is also easiest to implement. Then is called data caching. We just understand the concept because it is basically implemented at the database side. Okay, so data caching is generally implemented at the database side, so it is not part of your this particular topic. So we are not going to see in detail for this data caching, but we will see how we can implement the output caching and fragment caching. But generally all these are part of the caching, so the techniques can be different. Okay, so these techniques we will see when that demonstration is going to be given by me. first let us understand the theoretical understanding of this caching. So first one is, what is output caching? So there is a directive that is called as output cache, and using this directive we can put some attributes. So there are some attributes like duration, location, variable param, variable header, and variable custom. So these are the attributes of the output caching. So as of now you may not understand these things, but when I show the demonstration you will come to know where exactly these attributes are getting used. Okay, so the output caching directive is actually equipped with these different attributes. One is duration. This is mandatory. Duration means how many for how many seconds this caching should be alive or should be valid. Okay, so to those many seconds or minutes it will be valid. Then after that the caching object will be removed from the memory. So that means the caching object will be somewhat manipulated by the programmer as per the requirements of your web application. And some different settings like variable parameter, variable header, or variable custom. So all these are available. So we will go through them one by one. So what is output caching? So in this, the first one is output caching we are discussing. So this output caching is pages that use the output cache are executed at one time and the page results are cached. Okay, so for the first time, whenever you want to show the home page of your website, okay, so the home page is actually loading the information from some third-party libraries, showing some weather information, which is calculated after parsing the content from APIs. Okay, then some advertisements, then some blogs. In that way, the home page is actually created with some common functionalities as per your design. So every time, whenever any user is actually for executing that first page, normally without caching, what happens? Normally, if you are not implementing the caching, the home page has to connect to the database, then it has to fetch the data. That is for some of the functionality. And another part of the functionality may be accessing the resources from the third-party libraries. So there are some third-party libraries which are freely as well as paid ones available. So you want to take the data to show onto the user interface. So that is also being parallelly done. Third one is, again, the database is fetching some important information in the format of blogs. So that is also fetching. So all these are actually processing intensive. Okay, so all these are the first time compilation. The server side page has to execute all these functionalities, going to the database, fetching up the details, and creating the nice interfaces. Okay, so even in that CSS are also there, and these CSS may be from the external resources, maybe from the google.com. Okay, so there are some open CSS platforms are also available. So everything is actually not created on your end. They are actually processing intensive. It has to look up somewhere else. Okay, so what is the disadvantage of this? If you are creating a simple page and that page is taking some immense amount of time to calculate the things, to present the information, maybe it may be some 10 to 15 milliseconds, but for each of the request, for each of the client, every request is going to take those 15 or 20 milliseconds of time every time. Okay, so that means you have 100 users getting connected at the same time. That means you have 1500 milliseconds of time that is processed. You have 1 lakh users, that is incremented by 10 times. Okay, suppose you have 10 million, again it is incremented by 100 times. So in that way, the processing is getting incremented with the number of users who are actually connected at that given time. So what can be done in these scenarios? Suppose you are creating a basic website which do not have many functionalities, and the users are also not in those many numbers. Then you may not be using this output caching. Still, the things will be running very fast, because for normal 1 lakh users, maybe 5 lakh users के लिए आपका website parallelly properly चलेगा, कोई problem नहीं है. But when we are thinking in terms of huge number of users who are getting connected at the same time, then in those conditions you need to consider some performance optimization techniques. So these ASP.NET provides this particular output caching only for that sake. It is for the performance improvement of your website. Even though your website, suppose you are working in a company, you have created a good website, and the users are actually connected in lakhs. Okay, at any given point of time, 1 lakh users are actually getting connected, and at that time you want to increase the performance of the website. Otherwise, what happens? Suppose the scalability of your hardware may be for only up to 5 lakh users. Okay, so what in case suppose you have given one some offer on your website, so hurry up with this offer, otherwise it will be gone in maybe by this end of day. Okay, suppose in that way you have given one offer, and what happens naturally, the normal 5 lakh users traffic will be incremented to maybe some 8 lakh users per any given minute, or maybe per hour. Okay, so these certain dynamic traffic increments have to be calculated beforehand by the programmer, and they have to be accordingly provided with the solutions. So how to do that? They have to simply enable some caching features which are by default offered by the ASP.NET platform. And the implementation is also very simple. You don't have to code a very longer file in which you are doing this, you are doing that. So all these are not essential. Basically, you want to enable this directive. This is called as output cache directive. By enabling this directive, ASP.NET takes care of from your side, from the programmer side. So that is the best part of implementing the caching. Okay. So what exactly happens in this output caching? Only for the first time compilation. Suppose for your website, the first user has actually connected to take that offer, and it has been compiled for the first time. Then after, for the subsequent request, whoever is coming, maybe some 5 lakh users are connected in given 1 hour. So for those 5 lakh users, the compiled cached version of that object is going to be served again and again. Okay, so that means only for the first time, the maybe some 20 milliseconds time is wasted for the processing, but for the remaining 5 lakh requests, directly the object is being served, because there is nothing to change as such for the home page on user to user basis, because all users are going to have the same page. Okay, only when they log into their dashboards, accordingly you have to show up with their personalized or customized information. Otherwise, whatever the common things, whatever the common home page functionalities, you can show up in a common manner. So that's why we are taking the advantage of directly serving that object, which is the cache object, without going without request going further to the server. Okay, suppose let us see with an example. This is your client. Okay, so some middle layer, there is a cache object. So this is the cache object, and this is the web server. Only for the first time, for the first request, it is going to take the request, and it has to be processed by the server, maybe depending on the database, then some DLLs, then some third-party APIs. There are number of dependencies it may be having. Okay, but only for the first time, it is going to take all those information, and it is getting stored in the web cache object. Okay, for the first request only. Then after the second, from the second request onwards, it is directly served from here. From the third request or from the fifth request, तो यहाँ से पूरा ये कट डाउन हो गया completely. ये जो पूरा processing का जो time ले रहा है, it was completely eliminated. So thereby we are saving the hardware limitations, we are saving the time, we are saving the processing, and we are actually improving the responsiveness of your web application. जो पहले 15-20 मिलीसेकंड में वो जो रेस्पॉन्स को क्लाइंट को भेज सकते थे, अभी मे बी इन 1 or 2 milliseconds के अंदर क्लाइंट का रेस्पॉन्स मिल जाता है. सो दैट इज द बेस्ट एडवांटेज ऑफ हैविंग द कैशिंग. सो व्हाई इट इज why the processing is being improved? Because the pre-executed page is directly served to the later request. Okay, so that is up to you. उसको one hour persist करना है, 1 day persist करना है, that is up to you. The programmer can set with the cache timeout. So to that timeout, the pre-executed page will be again and again served, so that the 5 lakh users or 10 lakh users may not be getting bothered about the hardware failures, or may not be having the lags from their ends. Okay, so performance and scalability both are getting benefited in this. Server response times are highly drastically reduced. Okay, so that is one more advantage. Then CPU load is also reduced because there is nothing to process as such. When there is nothing to process, your CPU is ready to process any another information for a different object. Suppose this is only for the home page. Okay, so whatever the image that we have created here, this is only for the home page, but you may be having some contact us page, you may be having some about us page. There are so many pages on your web pages. So the CPU load is exactly shifted to handle those different pages, or as well as whoever the connected, that means logged in users, because the logged in users may be having some different interfaces. They are having the customized features, they are looking some own preferred data in their from their dashboards. So there some processing has to be done, so the CPU load can be shifted to serve to those particular requests. So in that way we are balancing the we are actually balancing the all the requests, so that whatever the frequently visited request is going to be served directly from the cache object, and whatever is unfrequented data which is seeked by the user can be processed. So in that way we are actually what we are doing, we are balancing the processing of the web server. Okay, so these are the advantages. So performance, scalability, responsiveness. Okay, so less time. All these are the best advantages when you take this caching. Appropriate caching of the pages affects site's overall performance drastically. So when you can try it out on your own once you complete the practical. Okay, you can try it out on your created website. You can drastically see the best performance it is giving with the web server responses. So that is what happens with the output caching. So output caching, some attributes we need to set. One is duration that we have seen in the first slide. So these are the some attributes that we need to operate upon. We will see that through the demonstration. But for the duration, you need to remember the duration is generally set in the seconds. Okay, it is not like for the case of the state management wherein the session will be kept in minutes. Okay, तो जहाँ पे हमने state management में use किया वहाँ पे हमने minutes में set किया था, but whereas this cache is actually to be given with units in seconds. Then it is required because it is a mandatory one. Okay, so how it is looking like, you can see this is the syntax for creating that particular cache. So what this is called as a directive. Okay, so this part is called as directive. Output cache directive with that compulsory field like duration 600 seconds. 600 seconds means, that means it is for 10 minutes. Okay, so that means the cache object is valid for only 10 minutes. Okay, so whatever the created compiled version of your object is going to be maintained for only 10 minutes of the time, and location can be any. You can say that the location can be client, it can be web server. So in that way there are some manipulations that we can enforce. And vary by param, we will come to this vary by param. Okay, so we will come to that later. Then location, you can see underneath, the location can be server. Where it is held in the memory of the web server. Okay, then downstream a header is added to the response to indicate proxy servers. Okay, not exactly in the server. Downstream means in the proxy servers the cache object is going to be maintained. Then at the client side means in the browser. Okay, so browser side the cached object is going to be created. But what is the disadvantage of having the browser side? Because n number of users are getting connected, only for one user the cache will be applicable. Okay, so that is the disadvantage. So suppose you got a user who is frequently visiting your website. So in those cases you may be created with this client location set with this output cache attribute. So we generally come करते हैं. Then any output cache can be located on any of these locations. So it is dynamically decided by the web server where is the best location to save, depending on the server resources, okay, number of users connected. So you can keep safely any. So thereby web server is taking the decision from your side. So none means no caching is there. So that means it is turned off. Okay, so no output caching is turned on. That means it is turned off. So these settings you can put. So accordingly, the web server is going to create the cache object, and sometimes it may put in server, and as per your directions, as per your attributes, it may sometimes put in client. Okay, or otherwise you may completely miss out with that functionality by setting with none. Even though you are calling this output cache, location none means it will not be activated. So in that way also, for temporarily for your testing purposes, you can keep open this output cache directive, but setting this location none, it will be simply deactivated. Got it? Then we will see one more attribute that is called as variable param. The cache stores multiple copies of a page, multiple copies of a page. Okay, because every every website is offering dynamic web pages. Suppose you are going to create any product based website. Okay, so the product based website will be having the domain URL like suppose www.yourdomainname.com. Okay, then products. So this is your page name. The page is only one. The page is only one, but it is actually getting differentiated with that product ID. Okay, so even Amazon and Flipkart, all these are actually operated on these terms only. Maybe some categories, products are coming. So actually the functionality is being written in this product page, but when you call this URL product/20, what it does is it will look up in the database for the product ID which is matching with this 20. And then accordingly it will take the data and present that information on the browser. Suppose you have asked later on some 40. So what it will do? It will fetch that information from the database where it is matching with the ID like 40. So in that way, even though the page is unique, we can have some 1,000 different ways of having different interfaces. अगर आपके database में 10,000 products है, suppose in the case of Amazon, it may be lakhs of products. Okay, so these lakhs of products are basically called from the products page, which is a single page, but these 10,000 or maybe 1 lakh products are having entirely different information. वो एक दूसरे से same नहीं है. Suppose you are asking for a mobile, it is completely different from the second one, which can be a laptop. Okay, so they have different product information, images, pricing, the description, delivery, everything is different. Okay, so how to maintain the caching in those scenarios? So at that time we are going to specify by this particular attribute called as variable param. What is this parameter? So the parameter, this is called as parameter. Okay, so these variable parameter means for each of the 40, 20, 10, 15, 35, for each of the product output response of the page, one single copy is being maintained in the cache object. That means for all the 10,000 products, 10,000 different cache objects are being maintained, even though that is for a same page, because this is a dynamic page. It's not a same static page which is going to serve the same data across all the users, because it do not have any dynamic functionality. So that is where we can keep use of this variable parameter, and you can suppose what is this 40? This can be a P is equal to 40. What is this P? Product ID. Then C is equal to 20. What is this C? Category. So in that way you can operate on the name of the parameter, whether it can be a count, whether it can be location, or it can be an ID. So accordingly you can keep on adding the parameters, that means यहाँ पे अगर आपका 10,000 products है, 10,000 products के लिए 10,000 into these two, that means total 20,000 cache objects are getting created. So that means आपका जो parameters, number of parameters, number of products, all these are getting affected by this particular variable param. Carefully, अगर मैंने यहाँ पे ID simply एक ही ID लिया, so then directly 10,000 maintain करेगा. But मैंने जैसे ही इसको manipulate किया, location, count, maybe user, ऐसा मैं अलग-अलग parameters के साथ play करूँगा तो क्या होगा? Those many number of products into 3 or 4 number of parameters that you have taken. So it will be drastically incremented with 30,000, then 50,000, 70,000. So in that way, but serious programmers will try to do the checks and balances, because maintaining these number of 10,000, 20,000 cache objects, unless otherwise it is not required, will be a performance penalty on the web server. So that's why you have to measure out first of all whether all these cache objects are required or not. If it is not required, then don't take these variable parameter. Okay, most frequently visited जो भी प्रोडक्ट है, पॉपुलर प्रोडक्ट है, उसको ही आप इसके पेज कैश करने के लिए यूज कर सकते हैं. सो इन दैट वे द प्रोग्रामर हैज टू फाइनली टेक द डिसीजंस टू हैव द बेस्ट परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ द वेब एप्लीकेशन. Okay, so that is the importance of the variable parameter. Similarly, there is one more attribute that is called as variable header. The cache stores multiple copies of the same page based on the HTTP headers. This is less used because sometimes we need to accept by the languages, because Amazon is served across different countries. Maybe users connected from English countries are having the high traffic. So at that time they can take these decisions like variable parameter, accept the language as the header information which is looking up. So जब भी कोई ऐसा रिक्वेस्ट आता है तो उसके लिए कैशिंग ऑब्जेक्ट बनाएगा और उसके लिए कैशिंग ऑब्जेक्ट के थ्रू रिस्पॉन्स को सर्व करेगा. Okay, so this alternative is also available, but mostly the programmer has to look for this variable parameter whenever you are dealing with the dynamic web page implementations, because the page is common, but through that page you are going to have so many different outputs for all the given requests. Okay, अगर किसी ने 40 किए तो 40 के लिए अलग रिक्वेस्ट जनरेट करेगा, 100 दिए तो 100 के लिए एक और रिस्पॉन्स जनरेट करेगा, which is completely different from that of 40th response. Got it? Then one more is there, that is variable custom. Variable custom means if the value is browser, cache varies by the browser type. Suppose the user is connected from the Chrome, then only to that particular browser only the cache object will be applicable. Suppose the same user is getting connected from the same machine but from a Safari browser, at that time the cache will not be helpful to them. Okay, so that is the variation that we can implement. And if the value is a custom string, you must override http application.get variable custom string and global.ascx. ये highly advanced users use करते हैं, that we don't have to bother. Okay, the settings can be customized by implementing some coding. That is what you need to understand. Okay, by overriding this method http application.get variable custom string, you can, as a programmer, as a experienced programmer, you can do the changes in your caching object after your basic cache object is not fulfilling that particular feature. जो भी caching feature आप apply करना चाहते हैं वो अगर implement नहीं हो सकता, then you can take advantage of this variable custom implementation. Okay, so these are the output caching features. Then we got this fragment caching also. What is this fragment caching? Fragment caching is just as you can vary the versions of the page that are completely created for the entire page, whereas the fragment caching is generally applicable for the smaller portions of your code. They are called as user controls. We will see this user control demonstration in the practical slot. Okay, so suppose you got a full page. In this full page, output cache क्या करता है, पूरा का पूरा पेज को कैश करता है. Okay, so the entire page is getting cached as a response object, but when you implement this fragment caching, only certain portions of your page, जैसे मैंने यहाँ पे cache करना चाहता, then this is the another caching object that I want to implement. Maybe this is a weather information that you are tracking from somewhere else, and this is the header information coming from somewhere else. So all these partial caching that we can incorporate, so they are called as fragment caching. So nothing but they are the page fragments. ये एक part है, ये एक part है, ये एक part है. Similarly, you can take one more part from the page. So in that way, you can implement the fragment caching. Then how to implement that? You have to implement that in the user control. Right now, you will not understand the user control. I will show that in the practical, how to create the user control, then how to put that output cache directive in that user control. Then it becomes the fragment caching. करना वही है जैसे हमने यहाँ पे किया था. Yes, this is the directive that we need to set, but previously we have implemented in the page, but right now for the fragment caching we need to implement in the user control. Only that is the difference. Okay, then it becomes the fragment caching, and whenever the user controls are there exactly the caching is being maintained. बाकी जो कंटेंट है, ये पूरा जो बाकी जो कंटेंट मैन्युअली प्रोसेस करेगा, बट ये जो पोर्शंस को वो डायरेक्टली कैश ऑब्जेक्ट से लोड करेगा. So this is how the fragment caching operates. Again, it actually supports the variable parameter, variable control also. Location not supported because fragments must reside on the server to be assembled. Location do not support because fragments must reside on the server. Because fragments क्या है, user controls है, they have to be served from the server only. So that's why location is not actually supported in this. Then one more is variable control. Variable control is the 6th attribute supported by the output cache directive, only supported in user control. Okay, so it is not supported in the page caching. It is only supported in the fragment control, fragment caching. Okay, so caching is based on the user control properties. So variable control means state, country, and these settings you can implement. And variable parameter can be anything. Suppose star means all. Suppose you got the page, like जैसे मैंने previous example में बताया, page /1/ some 30 some category ID. So in that way, all these are parameters. So for all these parameters, suppose 3 parameters है तो क्या होगा, request 30 responses 30 है, 3 into 30 products के लिए 90 total objects it is going to create. So in that way, star means it is taking all the parameters into consideration. Otherwise you have to put separator by comma, like 30 comma ID, something like that. Okay, ID maybe /country comma state. So in that way you can have the variation. So page fragment output cache best practices. You just some do's and don'ts that is given. Generally use of the output cache in pages that contain input forms is not good idea. Okay, so this is the basic understanding. Input form के लिए अगर आप caching enable करेंगे तो first user का जितना भी response है वही request बाकी के subsequent cache objects के लिए भी generate करेगा. So that's why it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. It's a basic common thing. Okay, so wherever you are accepting some user information, so there you don't have to put this caching. Generally it is good practice to not to use the output caching in pages that requires authentication. It is also understandable क्योंकि first user के लिए जो authenticate किया है वही credentials reuse होगा for the subsequent request. So that's why it is also not the best as well as the good practice to taking caching into consideration. Then don't use output caching for the static page. Okay, so static pages के लिए आउटपुट कैश लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, बिकॉज स्टैटिक पेज will never process from the server side that much, because there is no database connection, there is no third party libraries loading. जब प्रोसेसिंग ज्यादा है ही नहीं है तो आउटपुट कैश लेके बहुत ज्यादा एडवांटेज नहीं मिलेगा. Then output cache for page that contains lighter content, it is also not good to consider in those situations. And output cache for page that execute faster, जो आपका पेज में ज्यादा लॉजिक नहीं है, वेरी फास्ट एग्जीक्यूट करके ऑलरेडी प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं. So generally this is a condition that testers and programmers need to carry out after some testing, because execute faster means when the scalability is incremented, the execution may be slowed down. So in those situations, for how many number of users the faster responses are there, they have to check. They have to first of all carry out the basic testing. Then accordingly, whether to put this output cache or not, they can take the decision. And where we can implement this caching in the public pages. Okay, then where this page performance is somewhat slower. Okay, so you are getting very slow responses from the page, maybe depending on the database connections, maybe depending on some third-party libraries lookups. So where you can take the decision and where you can take the best advantage of the caching. Okay, so even though it is executing slower, but is only for the couple of times, then afterwards, directly as it is taken from the cache object, the response will be very fast. Then use output cache for the pages that contains heavy contents, then that are frequently accessed, and some dynamic content across the pages. So all these are the do's where you can think of using the caching for the ASP.NET. The data caching, it is somewhat implemented on the data of your program by calling a particular object called as cache. You can take the advantage of cache, but like it will be operated on the view state. This view state को हमने कैसे implement किया, on the similar lines we can take the advantage of the cache also, but for all the users the cache object will be sent to the given time frame. अगर आपको 1 घंटा रखना है तो 1 घंटे तक यही काउंटर मिलेगा. देन हम डेटाबेसेस के ऊपर भी डेटा कैशिंग अप्लाई कर सकते हैं एंड कॉन्सेप्ट, एंड बेसिकली द कैशिंग इज इम्प्लीमेंटेड ऑन द database side, so that every time database is also not bothered for frequent frequent connections and releasing the whatever the threads. Okay, so that part is also there, but you need to know this data caching concept is also there, and where you are implementing some highly CMS based applications or some data driven applications, there you can take advantage of this data caching